Okay. Lorna, does it look like Bruce will be here shortly?
Well, I had to resend him the link to the meeting. So
Okay.
that was my understanding that he was going to sign right in.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's wait a minute as we work through that. We've got a short agenda today. We have time to start a few minutes late, uncharacteristic, but a few minutes late.
Aaron, this is Bill Dickinson. Question of between the shared responsibility of private public. Is that clear, and where is it documented? We had a situation, I found a situation right here where I live where some indoor drains, floor drains, had backed up during the storm. And you could tell pretty clearly it was stormwater backing up because of leaves coming out and things like that. And the maintenance people indicated they thought it was the responsibility of the city to clean it out. And they had requested such, but they had not gotten any response. So is there any way we can get clarity as to indoor floor drains?
So I believe those floor drains are privately owned because on the lateral sewer, so I guess sort of the magic date, I guess, is July 1st, 1955. Anything after that date, any construction that took place, it's the sewer lateral from the house to the connection in the city mainline sewer is 100% homeowner responsibility.
What year was that again?
July 1st, 1955. For construction prior to that date, it's in the city code, and I should know this off the top of my head. I want to say it's 5-6-25 something. I don't know exactly what. It talks about this sort of shared ownership, but from the house, but the city's piece is really only from the connection to the main to the curb. Anything past that still is private property, is owned by private property. I guess in terms of leaves maybe coming in from an interior drain is really the issue of infiltration and inflow of stormwater instead of getting into the sanitary sewer system. So likely what may have happened is sometimes people, and I'll talk a little bit about sources of I&I, and I know Karen has shared this, I think, before in her presentations, talked about that as well, is there are ways that stormwater gets into the sanitary sewer system. And so some of that could be somebody has maybe like a sloped driveway, and there's that grate, that graded sort of inlet at the end of the driveway so the water doesn't go rushing into the garage. And what we find with older construction, some of those driveway drains are connected to the sanitary sewer. They're not connected to a storm sewer. Things were allowed to be built that way in the past.
Okay, well, thank you. I'll direct the question over to these folks, over to you, and you can answer it to them directly. Okay.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you, Aaron, and it's sort of a preview of her topic coming up later in the agenda. So I think we've got Mr. Johnson with us now. Do we, Lorna? I think we do.
Yes, we do.
Good. Okay, we have full attendance today. I call to order the 886th meeting of the Board of Directors of Alexandria Sanitation Authority, now known as AlexRenew. Board members, can you look at the agenda, please? And do I have a motion to approve the agenda as it appears on the screen?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. This is a virtual meeting, so we need to hear from council on the procedures for a virtual meeting. Council?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency, the September 21st, 2021 AlexRenew Enterprises Directors meeting is being held electronically. Pursuant to the electronic participation policy that you board adopted back in June, you may remember that that policy allows for entirely electronic meetings with no quorum physically present when there is a declared local state of emergency. And the Alexandria City Council has extended the local state of emergency for COVID-19 through January of next year. So this enables the board to meet electronically as you are this evening. And we're following the same procedures as we previously did with the meeting being recorded, notifying the public that if they wish to comment during the public comment period, that they can do so through the Zoom platform. And we are proceeding basically in accordance with your adopted policy. And if there are any questions, please let me know. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Counselor. Lorna, do we have any members of the public who would like to speak?
No, we do not.
Okay, let's move right into the consent calendar. I'll give the board a few minutes to review the minutes from our last meeting of July 20th. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of our July meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Caldarelli, second by Mr. Beal. I'll do a roll call vote because this is a virtual meeting. Mr. Beal,
Aye.
Ms. Caldarelli,
Aye.
Mr. Dickinson. Bill, you're on mute, I think. I think that was an aye.
Aye.
There you go. That was an aye. Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. There is no unfinished business. If we could, let's move into new business. We've got a great presentation from Aaron Bevis Carter on the sewer master plan process. So I'm going to turn it over to Aaron, if you'd like to present. We're all ears.
Okay, give me just a moment to see if I can share my screen. Okay. And sorry, you think I'd get used to this by now. So see if I can get it into presentation mode. Okay, can everyone see? Okay, great.
Looks good.
So I just want to thank the board and Karen for allowing me to come out and speak to you on this master plan effort. This is an update to the sanitary sewer master plan back from 2013. And I'm not covering everything in the plan, and I'm going to apologize if I kind of go on too long, and if I need to wrap up or go faster at any point, Karen, just let me know. But these are some of the things I wanted to cover tonight. I think one of the ways this plan is a little bit different from the 2013 plan is the focus on wet weather and some of our mitigation strategies for dealing with wet weather. Our previous master plan really focused on the impacts of growth on capacity, whether it's our collection system capacity or capacity at AlexRenew or Arlington with respect to wastewater treatment. So that plan still does that assessment, but I'll probably spend a little bit more time about wet weather. But I'll start out and I just want to say in advance, I guess, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask during the presentation. Lorna, if I don't see somebody raising their hands, just let me know. Feel free to interrupt. but I'm just going to start with just kind of a system overview. All of you, I think, are familiar with this. This just shows sewers within the city, the interceptor sewers, where AlexRenew owns pumping stations, and of course the CSO outfalls, which the city has transferred to AlexRenew. And just want to kind of in this like light orange and red really shows what the assets that the city owns, which are the collection system. So we own and operate 246 miles of sanitary and combined sewer. A lot of these are smaller inch sewers, vast majority 12 inches in diameter or smaller. And that's because they will collect sewage flows and then convey them to the AlexRenew interceptor system. And I'll talk a little bit more about our rehab program, but to date, about 1/4 of the sanitary sewer has been rehabilitated through pipelining. And I'll talk a little bit about how we do about our growth forecasts. Our growth forecasts are really sort of the meat of how we assess the impacts of growth on our sanitary sewer system. These growth forecasts are prepared by planning and zoning. We work very closely with them, and they take growth and they kind of put it into all these different categories that we translate into sewage flows. So I can go over the categories just kind of briefly. And some of these some of these colors may be now pink to blue, for instance, in Potomac Yard, where site plans have come in and site plans have been released. This was kind of prepared at the start of the process. But they break it out into, what are the ongoing site plans? Those are shown in blue, and they're at various stages of development. And sometimes these site plans kind of feed into these much larger plans. So site plan may be for an individual parcel or a block, but they may be part of what we call our small area plan or coordinated development districts, which are shown in pinks. And these are done basically by, geographically, such as the North Potomac Yard small area plan, or the Eisenhower West plan, or the Landmark Mall plan, or the Beauregard plan. They are basically long-range planning documents that usually cover a 20 to a 30-year period. And then site plans will come in from these plans. So that makes up a lot of the growth between now and the next 30 years. There are some smaller sites that we call infill sites, which are individual sites that aren't part of a plan, but we think because planning and zoning thinks because of the market, they are kind of right to develop typically within, a 10 to 20 year period. And so that kind of covers things through year 2050. And then after that, there are these like light green areas that they call long-term potential. There's no plan for those to redevelop, but there is a kind of planning and zoning looking into their crystal ball thinks will redevelop. And an example of that is, for instance, in the northwest portion of the city, the Northern Virginia Community College. There are some thoughts that may one day, looking at the crystal ball, that they may transition to something more akin to a 4-year university with dorms and facilities and those kinds of things that aren't there today. So that just kind of summarizes the different growth forecasts that we have in the city. And so we look at that in terms of our collection system, the interceptor system. Obviously, those are done in coordination with AlexRenew and also with Fairfax County, and then with our treatment needs. So I'll talk about wastewater treatment first. It's kind of a busy slide. There's a lot of numbers, but we currently have service agreements with AlexRenew and Arlington County that specifies on an average annual basis how many million gallons a day of treatment is allocated to the city. And so those numbers are kind of here on the left. And then what we do is we take those growth forecasts, we have information about existing flows, and we take those growth forecasts to see, well, what impact will growth have on our treatment needs? And what we find is very similar to the last master plan, where we don't think we need additional capacity at Arlington County at their plant, but at AlexRenew, we are in the AlexRenew sewer service area, we are seeing a need of close to 4 MGD. And that probably around the time frame of 2040 is where we're going to hit our existing allocation. So, you know, what we have to do as a city is continue to work with AlexRenew to see what are some of the alternatives. You know, there's obviously alternatives such as reducing infiltration and inflow in the system, but also what else can be done to, you know, is something like wastewater treatment expansion even possible at AlexRenew, which is very urban, and you know, is there potentially capacity that Fairfax may not need at AlexRenew? So those are the things that we kind of identify in the plan and need to evaluate jointly moving forward. And I'll just pause in case there are any questions. Okay, so and then I want to talk a little bit about interceptor capacity. You know, we have, I think one of the things Karen talked about at the July meeting was that there has been
Aaron,
a lot. Yes.
Aaron, it looks like Bruce has his hand up.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I did not. Go ahead, Bruce.
I have my virtual hand up. Is there any this is a far out idea, crazy idea, but could we divert some of our capacity from AlexRenew to the Arlington plant, given that we're not using all of our 3 million gallons there?
That is definitely one of the things that we can look at. And it is obviously, you know, you have to get the flow to that shed. And we had, and just as an example, we, you know, the BRAC facility, when that came under construction, that actually pumps flows into the Arlington shed. So there may be some additional potential for some of that. But once again, you know, that only gets us so far out of our 4 MGD need. But that's certainly something to look at moving forward.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's a good idea. I just wondered if it was theoretically possible. Thank you.
Theoretically, it's possible. And then just want to talk about some of the interceptor modeling that's been done. Karen had mentioned, you know, this kind of this 3-party interjurisdictional engineering and modeling goes back to the basically the 1980s, 1990s, kind of predates both of us. But at the time, you know, even in the 1990s, you know, the impacts of wet weather was really, you know, it existed then as it exists now. And I think that as part of those initial studies, I think City and Fairfax took it upon themselves to really address infiltration and inflow in their system. So that has led to a lot of investigations and rehabilitation, but we still see that it doesn't necessarily get us there. You know, when we're looking at wet weather, when we're looking at growth. And so some of the more recent studies have come up with some different potential recommendations, and just want to kind of outline a couple of them here. From one of our past studies, is most recent studies, is the potential to do some sewer lining, some sewer upsizing. There's still a lot of work to be done on this front, but the study proposed sewer lining on the AlexRenew Holmes Run trunk sewer from basically the county line to 395, and then sewer upsizing on a Fairfax County asset, the kind of parallel lower Holmes Run sewer. And the reason is that there's a way to basically maximize kind of the flows between these two sewers, such that there aren't issues with potentially with flows out of the system, sanitary sewer overflows, which of course are not permitted. And so that work is still ongoing. There's still work to be done. And go ahead, Bill. See your hands up.
Yes, looking at this chart, it's very interesting. If I look down on the map, the next one, where you showed the Upper Holmes Run improvement, the section that is really Fairfax County, that lower quadrant down there, does planning and zoning also look at what Fairfax County's projections are as far as development? There seems to be a lot of development going on down on the Richmond Highway, and that flows into our system right now. And I don't know if, just thinking about the other plants they have in Fairfax County, whether or not they can be reasonably diverted to Fairfax County plants.
So I will say this modeling, this interjurisdictional modeling, that AlexRenew is, kind of taking the lead on, but the city and Fairfax are, we're all working on this together. We have provided our growth forecast as part of that modeling, and Fairfax has provided their growth forecast as well. So it does include that.
Okay.
Right. And Bill, they're capped by their service agreement at 32.4 MGD. And we have a letter from them saying they will need no additional capacity in our system.
Thank you.
Bruce? Did you have a question?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, and then the other interceptor I wanted to talk about was Potomac Yard. Of course, Virginia Tech is breaking ground on their innovation campus in North Potomac Yard. And along with that comes a lot of new sewer infrastructure, including the Innovation District pumping station and the associated force main. Of course, so within Potomac Yard, the developer is responsible for building all this new infrastructure, but AlexRenew, it will be turned over to AlexRenew to own and to operate once constructed. And I know AlexRenew is sitting closely at the table with them as this has during the design process and now the construction process as that pumping station breaks ground. And so a lot of this is being done in two separate phases, with the Virginia Tech campus and some of the other buildings around there coming first, and then some of the other improvements are going to be done as part of phase 2, which I think is I forget exactly when, but probably late 2020s to early 2030s. And the only thing that, and this involved a lot of sort of negotiation with the developer, that the developer is not responsible for constructing, is if there's a proposed relief sewer on the lower part of the trunk sewer that the city will be responsible for, at least from a financial standpoint, from a funding standpoint. And that's because it's outside of Potomac Yard, and there are flows from other areas that will flow into this sewer. And they aren't really called out here, but you can see that there is like the Braddock Metro neighborhood plan area. They connect to the Potomac Yard trunk sewer. We've done some combined sewer separation in the past that has connected to the sewer. So this relief sewer is the last piece of what will be needed, and AlexRenew monitors flows in the trunk sewer and will continue to work on the timing of both the extent of the trunk sewer and on the timing of when it's needed for this relief sewer. Jim, did you have a question?
Yes, the phase 2, does all of Potomac Yard continue to pump to the 4 Mile Run pump station? You've got several different colors. I'm just wondering what direction the flows are going.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so the Innovation District pumping station is actually, the flows are pumped to the south through a new force main, and it'll connect into the Potomac Yard trunk sewer. then from there, and so there is a pump over that I think Karen had talked about at the last meeting, where flows can be pumped from 4 Mile Run to the east, to the Potomac Yard shed.
So then it continues straight south through Old Town.
And then it
down to the
continues
water.
south through,
Okay.
through all the way through Potomac Yard. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about collection system capacity. So back in around the time frame of around 2010, we had the city had a lot of small area plans that were up and coming. Beauregard was up and coming. There was discussions about Landmark Mall, Eisenhower West, a lot of development that was going to be happening primarily on the West End. And there was concerns that we did not know what the impact of all that development was going to be on our collection system. So the city embarked on developing basically collection system model. And so you have these individual basins because these are the basins that then tie into the trunk sewer system. And we focused the modeling on the areas where the greatest amount of development was anticipated. And then from there, we put in flow meters throughout the system so that we could actually calibrate the existing flows in the system and then add the growth related flows on top of that. And what we actually found is that there is, for the most part, sufficient capacity in this system, but we have identified a number of sewers that will need to be upsized. But the interesting thing is it's not all growth driven. Now, if it is growth driven, and a good example of growth driven is Beauregard. There is existing system capacity today, and site plans have been coming in and we have been requiring developers to make capacity improvements, specifically along the trunk sewer that runs, or not trunk sewer, but mainline sewer that runs along North Beauregard. So anything that's growth related, that is required to be built by the developers. That's not borne on by the existing customers. However, we do see that we have a number of existing capacity issues. And there are a couple of modeled sheds out in Delray and Rosemont, basins 14 and 16, for instance, where we don't have sewer capacity today out there. So we are kind of looking to, instead of the focus just being on development, it really needs to be a system-wide, city-wide model. So we are looking to collect the data to basically expand the model to include the entire city, and then also to develop a comprehensive plan for capacity upgrades where it's an existing issue, where it's not a growth-related issue. Go ahead, John.
Aaron, by the way, this is really informative. Just on this particular chart, how do you interpret, what's the meaning of the green and the red? The red
I'm sorry. So those are it's important to note we're still that basically the green is, so this is the built out model, assumes all the development, and anything in red is where we don't have capacity. Now, we haven't included every single sewer in our model, and that's something we need to expand upon as well to collect some additional. We really focus on the main branches in our model because it's a big effort trying to get 246 miles of sewer into the model. So we focus on the main branches. So for instance, in Basin 27, the main branch is on Beauregard. So anything in green has capacity. Anything in red does not have capacity, and that's where capacity upgrades are needed. Now, this 16,000 is based on not doing the entire city. So we know that number will go up, but it does provide a snapshot of what we currently do know.
Yeah. Hey, Aaron, now when you say we need more capacity, does that necessarily mean just bigger pipes? Is that the only solution there?
So I'll talk about that a little bit more. I think it's twofold. It's an issue of, like I said, infiltration and inflow in the system, and how do you reduce infiltration and inflow? there may be opportunities to do some capacity improvements.
Mhm.
So I guess I'll go ahead and kind of jump into kind of
Sure.
talking about infiltration and inflow. And I know Karen has shown this previously as well. I think of, so infiltration and inflow, you know, basically inflow is kind of direct flow, immediate flow into the sewer system. Infiltration takes a little bit longer because to get into the system. So it can happen during wet weather, it can happen after a wet weather event. But I kind of think of it is instead of collectively, but from two different categories, the public side and the private side. So the public side being inflow into the manholes or infiltration into broken pipe, cracked pipe, and then on the private side, you know, where we have these direct stormwater connections, such as maybe a downspout or roof leader, or whether it's something like breaks and cracks in the sewer laterals. And you know, we did a lot of flow monitoring back in the 90s in the studies that that city worked jointly with Fairfax and AlexRenew, and the city said, we're going to address I&I. But it was really, I guess I would say, the decision was made not to address private I&I, to address public I&I, that the city would do its part on the system first. And this next slide kind of shows the work that's been done to date. So we started, a lot of flow monitoring was done to determine kind of the order of where we would spend our efforts. So, and we did that through flow monitoring, looking at how much peak wet weather flow, kind of similar to that graph Karen had shown of flow coming into the pumping station. We looked at where we were having our highest peak wet weather in comparison to our typical average dry weather. And so we started it in the 4 Mile Run shed that had our highest I&I, and we moved to areas of high I&I to low I&I. Now, there was a threshold that was set that if we found that we didn't really have very much I&I, we didn't focus on those areas. So we didn't do the entire city. And so we started in 4 Mile Run, and we did pre-construction flow monitoring, post-construction flow monitoring, rehabilitated about 60 miles of sewer, which I don't have a good graphic. I should put something like that together, but essentially what it amounted to, like for instance, in 4 Mile Run and Commonwealth, it was about 1/3 of the sewers were rehabilitated. So 2/3 were not rehabilitated, 1/3 was out of that 60 miles. And what we found was we saw decreases in the amount of I&I from our post-construction flow monitoring. And, you know, and so we proceeded with, and we found that really with all of the sheds that we did this kind of work. However, and for the most part, things were kind of quiet on the wet weather front. We weren't having storms that were resulting in lots of SSOs or sanitary sewer overflows or sewer backups. But this, you know, I guess probably a number of different things going on. But one of the things is the storms are changing. They are, you know, we are having these very high, intense, shorter period storms. You know, I think before, you know, we would be more concerned about the wet weather from hurricanes and tropical storms. Now it's these microbursts where it may only rain for an hour, but we get 4 inches of rainfall within that hour. So we are seeing, even though we've, I think, done some good work, we are seeing that there is still more to be done. And just to show you where kind of our issues have been, using kind of our 311 reporting system, we've kind of mapped out the areas that are subject to these sewer backups. Now, you know, we don't want to pinpoint on exact addresses, so it's kind of like we kind of develop these kind of heat maps. And so not everything within the heat map necessarily floods, but something within the heat map, you know, has experienced sewer backups. So we're seeing it in Delray, we're seeing it in Rosemont, we're seeing it in sections of Old Town, which makes sense because that's a combined sewer system. And so we are, so I think we kind of step back with this master plan to say, okay, what are we doing to address these storms? Because really these storms started happening when we were starting this plan update. And so I'll talk a little bit about a few different initiatives. So prior to these storms happening, you know, we kind of went through our I&I program and we said, well, we need to still have a program where we actively inspect and rehab. So instead of calling it I&I, we were calling it an asset renewal program. And the idea was that we had a goal of inspecting, kind of based on best management practices and what other jurisdictions do, setting a goal of inspecting a certain percent of the system every year and then following up with rehab. And at the time, we were planning on focusing on those areas that weren't part of our I&I program. However, we have had these flooding events, these wet weather events, and we are saying, okay, you know, it has been 15, you know, plus years since we were in 4 Mile Run and Commonwealth. Let's start our efforts there. So there's a very distinct correlation between where we are currently doing the inspections that you have been seeing, that you mentioned earlier, John, and where these backups have been happening. And so so this is where we're currently doing inspections. We started that earlier this year. We will complete it at the end of this year, and then rehab will follow. And then, like this is kind of meant to be a cyclical program. So we do inspections and start rehab, and then we start the next round of inspections and rehab, and we go on and on. And oh, Jim, sorry, so you have a question.
Aaron, I think this is great data, and it's a fascinating presentation. I'm looking at slide 10 and 11. In slide 10, you've got basically the two areas you did I&I work first, or Delray and Rosemont, the pink and the purple, and it's almost a direct overlay between that and where the wet weather sewer backups are occurring.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like the repairs you did, the lining back 15 years ago, should still be in good shape. Do you have any kind of feel for what else may be going on that's causing the backups?
We do. I think there's a few different things. I would say there's a lot of different things. Several things. I think one is, you know, we only rehabbed about 30% or about a third of the system back then. And we think what we are seeing with our CCTV is that those sewers that we didn't rehab then, we are starting to show signs of deterioration of cracks. So those need to be rehabbed. We didn't inspect, we talked about this a little bit earlier about city-owned laterals that are city-owned versus privately owned. We didn't inspect laterals before. We're doing that now. That's another source of I&I that we haven't addressed previously. So that's part of it, I think, as well. And then I think the other two issues is the private I&I. So one of the things that we did in the early 2000s, when we did the initial CCTV and inspections and the manhole inspections, we also did drainage surveys. We actually walked now this was, you know, not on the inside of the home, where this was just walking along the outside of the home and seeing, hey, that downspout looks like it may be connected to the sanitary sewer system, or that driveway drain may be connected. And we actually followed up with dye testing of those. So we have a little bit of a catalog of where some of these private connections are. But like I said, I think the decision was made back then for the city to focus on the public side. And then I think the final piece of this is stormwater, right? You know, I&I gets into the system, you know, at least through the pipes and through the manhole covers and things like that when it doesn't have somewhere else to go. So there's a stormwater capacity issue as well. And I think, you know, and I think, you know, even if we just addressed it through maybe stormwater initiatives alone, and I know that stormwater management has a capacity program and a spot improvement program, even if we just did that, I think you would see a decrease in flows in our sanitary sewer system. It wouldn't eliminate all of the I&I by any means, but it would certainly help. So I think there's that piece as well, because we can try to get out as much of the I&I as we can. But if, you know, but the stormwater is going to find, I guess the water is going to take the path of least resistance. And I think we can seal up our pipes. We can try to address some of these private I&I connections, but it's a stormwater issue as well. It's kind of
Sure.
what I'm trying to get at. So along with the asset renewal program, we have some other wet weather mitigation strategies. Now, some of these are, are maybe aimed at I&I, but others are aimed at trying to reduce sewer backups from occurring, knowing that I&I tends to be something you kind of do over a long term. So at least I'll start at the bottom. We are trying to develop a private I&I program framework. We are looking at these storms, and we're looking at what we know about what we've collected over the years with respect to private property I&I to kind of really basically kind of, it'll be an estimate at best, but see what kind of impact that, several hundred downspouts might make in the system. So we're doing that kind of that engineering assessment or that sort of analytical assessment now, but we're also looking at what are other communities doing. Private I&I is not just a city issue. There are programs all over the country. A lot of times it's done, a lot of communities do it because they have a consent decree against them to address I&I because of things like sanitary sewer overflows, because it's hard work and it's expensive work to try to address private I&I. But we are looking at some of these other programs. We're looking at our own city code and trying to come up with a framework that we can bring to city management, to consider, and so that we can potentially implement a private I&I program in the future. There's a lot of issues right now in terms of, authority and some other things that have to be worked out. So it's working with the city manager's office, the city attorney's office, and really coming up with a framework that we think works best for Alexandria. Now, in the meantime, there are things that we're looking at to try to reduce sewer backups. We do have an existing backflow preventer assistance program. So if someone has a plumber install a backflow preventer on their sewer lateral so that to help prevent sewage from backing up into those interior floor drains, for instance, city provides a 50% reimbursement for up to $2,000. And we're going to continue to fund that program and make refinements as needed. Go ahead, John.
I know it's too early to talk about the framework, but what are some of the options or penalties the city can impose to mitigate the private I&I?
Sure. So there are some communities that have taken it up that basically you have to first have an ordinance in place that says that these types of connections are illicit. We don't have that today. Now at least we have it for new construction, but essentially these older homes are, somewhat grandfathered in basically. So you have to basically update the city code to say that regardless of what was done at the time of construction, that these are essentially illicit connections and are not allowed. You have to have that in your code first. And then you have to have a program that gives the city the authority to go onto private property and test those, right? And then other communities do it different ways. Sometimes communities will say, we're going to pick up the check 100%, and we're going to pay for these. So Kansas City is an example of that, where they have had a very robust inspection program, and then they essentially work with plumbers to essentially do these disconnections. It's currently a voluntary program though, so they only have so much participation, but they do it essentially on their dime. There are other programs where There are some, probably the most strictest is they do the inspection and then they tell the homeowner, this is what you have to do and this is how long you have to do it. And the homeowner is 100% responsible for getting those connections off of the sanitary system. And then there's some other programs. Some communities have what's called point of sale programs. So these inspections are tied when these houses come on the market. So it becomes, so a house goes on the market, they have to have this inspection done to make sure that there are no stormwater connections to the sanitary sewer, and that has to be done as part of the sale of the home. So there are those types of connections that exist as well. Go ahead, Bill.
Aaron, how much is, what's the participation rate been on the reimbursement for the backflow preventer program?
Sure. I don't have the exact number, but it's somewhere, I think we've had about 140 reimbursements that have been made, 140, 150. I can get that exact number. And
When was the program was set up when?
So this program used to exist a long time ago. I want to say back around 2004. We had kind of before a lot of this I&I work was done, rehab work was done, there was an event in 2003. And oddly enough, it was a snowfall event. It was like 18 inches of snow followed by a very quick warm up and about 2.5 inches of rain. And so there was, so the backflow preventer assistance program was implemented for the first time then. And back then it was a $500 reimbursement. And then I think, and then the program kind of faded into the background because we weren't having sewer backups like that event. And it really wasn't until July 2018 that we had a storm event in July 2018 that we saw some sewer backups, not nearly to the extent as the one in 2019 and 2020, but there were enough to say that, hey, we should restart this program again. And so we looked at, some of the cost, we kind of contacted some plumbers, looked at some of the costs and decided upon a 50% reimbursement. So it dates, so essentially the 140 to 150 that I'm quoting dates back to the fall of 2018.
So you make the payment and then you submit your billings to the city, then the
Correct.
city decides. Okay.
Yeah, so the way it works is the homeowner gets a plumber, the plumber does the work. There's basically just a one-page form that the homeowner has to fill out and sign and attach the invoice from the plumber. And then that reimbursement usually takes 2 to 3 weeks to get back.
Okay. Thank you.
Adriana, you have a question?
I do. Apologies if you've already said this, I must have missed it. Do you have an ETA on the development of the framework? Are you currently working on it? Is it something that you think is going to be ready for the city leaders to consider soon? Just kind of curious on the time frame.
Sure. So this is something that we're working with one of our engineering consultants on, and that work is really starting now. So we are hoping, so I think we probably need about a year to really develop, I think, the framework that we want to present to city leadership. We have to, there's the engineering analysis to show how much we think private I&I is contributing to this issue. There is, I think, the ordinance, we need to propose something specific with respect to the ordinance, working with city attorney's office. And then I think we really need to do this deep dive. We haven't done that deep dive of other jurisdiction programs, even though I've kind of rattled some off. That's just from a very cursory look. And so I would say it would really be sometime next year before we have something I think that we can propose.
Great, thank you.
Go ahead, Jim.
The backflow preventer assistance program, is there a limit to the amount of money per year that you can fund, or?
No, we have at this point, I guess, based on the participation, it hasn't been an issue in terms of funding. If we got all of a sudden, you know, maybe 500 or something all at once, we would have to, I think we would still fund it, but we may have to look at how either putting more money in our CIP for it. Right now, the amount of money that we have put into it, you know, we haven't used it all up year to year. So we can fund it by the same amount each year.
It surprises me that you haven't had more participation, because I think it's been fairly well publicized.
I think it has. One of the things that just, you know, that we're looking at, one of the criticisms of the program that we've had has to do with the waiver language. So there is a waiver kind of liability that people have to sign, and they say that there has been some people who have actually put in backflow preventers on their own, and they don't want the reimbursement because they say that that waiver language, they feel like it absolves the city of anything and everything, right? And so we are, and so when, you know, there's this pilot flood mitigation grant program. So this is for people who are having flooding from stormwater flooding from the outside. So they actually, you know, made their waiver language in such a way that it was to encourage participation. So we're actually looking at that and looking at some other waiver language. So that's one of the refinements we think we need to make to the program. We'll likely be looking at the reimbursement amount as well, as we're kind of, as we've been getting these invoices and receipts. And so I think that is one of the things, probably, I think the main thing that has maybe hindered some of the participation in the program. And I think there's, so I think once again, I think it's hard to say how many people have had these sewer backups. There are lots of areas of the city where people do not have sewer backups. So of course, they're not going to participate in the program. So it really is targeted in these areas that have had sewer backups. And so we do feel like we have, you know, through our e-news, I think through this, you know, the recent stormwater ad hoc group, we have tried to, in some of our neighborhood flooding meetings that we've had, we have tried to put the word out there about this program, but it's clear there are still some people we aren't reaching.
Thank you.
That's the challenge. And then the last thing just to touch on is sewer capacity. Obviously, we have some areas of the city where there isn't sufficient sewer capacity, and there is, you know, and we are seeing areas that have had, you know, repeat sanitary sewer backups. So we are looking at areas where we could, you know, if let's say there's a block of houses is served by an 8-inch pipe, and that 8-inch pipe goes into a 15-inch pipe. Well, can we upsize that sewer? Can we make it a 10-inch pipe or a 12-inch pipe? Because, you know, even if you go up one pipe diameter, you actually get a lot of capacity out of that. So maybe it doesn't eliminate sewer backups, but completely, but it certainly maybe reduces how much of a backup somebody has in their home. So that's something that we're looking at right now. And we're actually going to be proposing this as a program in our CIP. And so we're kind of focusing, and these are small, discrete areas where we think that it can be done relatively easy, relatively cheaply, where we have multiple customers who have had sewer backups and that think that could benefit from something like this. I think the important thing with the messaging is that this is not how we're solving our I&I issue, and that it is not going to necessarily eliminate the potential for sewer backups, because you may get that storm that's bigger than anything that we've seen that still could result in a sewer backup. But we are looking to do some kind of localized upsizing projects where we can. And then the last thing I just wanted to talk about is sort of, you know, as part of the master plan, we do look at our fees. You know, so sanitary sewer is basically fully, you know, both our operating and our capital comes from our revenue sources. we don't get money from the general fund. So there are two sources of revenue. There are our customers, and there's a fee that they pay on the monthly sewer bill, and then there are fees that we charge towards developers. So we do look at those fees as part of our master plan efforts, and I don't know, and so I'll just start with the master plan recommendation. With our current sewer user fee or sewer maintenance fee, we currently bill on, on a water consumption basis. This is different from how AlexRenew bills. AlexRenew uses a winter average, and that's pretty typical of most jurisdictions, because it really more accurately reflects the flows in the sewer system itself. So this has been something that we've been city has been back and forth on this issue. And so I think we are finally coming around to making this recommendation. I think first and foremost, I think it shows consistency. A lot of people have, and I've, talked to AlexRenew staff, that, people will call like, well, why am I being charged, for, let's say, 4,000 gallons for wastewater treatment, but I'm being charged based on 5,000 gallons for the city, right? It doesn't make, and you try to explain it that it's just two different bases for those fees. But I think at this point, I think we're kind of, on board, and we are looking to make that change, and to propose, because based on our fiscal year and when we do fee updates to our fees, implementing that July 1st of next year. And that gives lots of time to get all of the stuff that needs to be done kind of behind the scenes to make that happen. So that's one thing that comes out of our plan. And then this is really busy. This is a slide basically I shared with the development. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Bruce.
So what's the impact on total revenues with the,
Sure.
because it'll be a reduction in revenues from the residential customers and then an increase, I assume, for the commercial.
Right, so there is a reduction in revenues. We did look at that as part of the master plan, but we felt that we could absorb, that was something that we could absorb. So that 228 doesn't change because of the change in going to a winter average basis. It's fairly small. It's a fairly small percentage, somewhere around 4 to 5%. It really isn't that much, because generally those numbers really go up only in the generally spring and summertime, and only for certain customers. And then, so this is a slide basically that we've met with the development community. City has a sort of a standing meeting. So it's a lot of land use attorneys and land use engineers. And so what we've done is we have presented some of the changes that we are proposing to our connection fees. For the most part, there aren't many big changes. We are providing a bit of a credit of anytime something tears down, they essentially get a credit for what they had paid into the system previously. So we are increasing that to from 50% to 100%. And that's really kind of being consistent with our neighbors. And we kind of did it. We used to not have a tear down credit, but when we did the 2013 master plan, we decided to establish a credit and we made it 50%. We're just going that next extra step. We do find though that we feel like we will be charging a little bit more on the commercial side. And then senior living's been kind of a hot topic because there are all kinds of different types of senior living, and based on our code, is this a commercial facility? Is it a residential facility? So we're just essentially doing what we did with hotels back in the 2013 master plan, where we make it its own category. And And overall, we looked at, similar to Bruce's questions about change in revenue with the sewer billing, we looked at that change in revenue. Now, granted, developments, it's different. Some years you have a lot of development, some years you have less, but we kind of looked at the last 5 years worth of development project data to see how much additional revenue we would get or less revenue we would get. And we only saw about like a 2.5% difference, an increase by implementing these changes to the fee structures. So that's all I had today, other than to share the schedule for the master plan. We have the draft plan has been released. It went out through e-news. It's on our website. We're doing outreach, obviously, right now. There is a public meeting September 30th. It's been announced, I think, through e-news just last week. So that'll be a virtual public meeting. I'm also next week going to the Federation of Civic Associations to present at their meeting as well. And then, to offer to go into October to any of those, assuming if somebody like Delray wants to have me, I'm happy to come and present to them, but meeting with the Federation first and then offering to present individual civic associations if anyone is interested. And then following that, we're looking to bring the plan to Planning Commission. It goes to Planning Commission because it's a chapter of the city's overall master plan. And then from there to City Council public hearing. And then once the plan's adopted, we then come back with any changes to the ordinances, such as the sewer fees and the connection fees. So that's all I had. Thank you. I know it was a pretty lengthy discussion, but I appreciate all of the questions, and any additional questions or feedback, feel free to reach out to me.
Aaron, this is John. I think we all enjoyed this and it was very informative. That's why there were so many questions, right? I mean, this is important material presented well, and thank you for that. I'm going to let you put in a plug for you've got a meeting coming up on the 30th, right?
Yes.
What time on the 30th?
So it's a Zoom meeting, and it's at 7 p.m. Probably, I don't know how long the meeting will be. Probably I'm scheduling, maybe an hour and a half, but we'll go longer if needed or shorter if needed. And then the Zoom, I think the Zoom link, it's on the city calendar.
Right.
And then the e-news went out for signing up for that meeting. And yeah, so hopefully we get some good participation. Obviously, and then I think, and I don't know that the next stormwater ad hoc group meeting will be before this meeting. I suspect that may be, I don't know if you know, John, maybe.
The stormwater meeting, I think, is going to be somewhere around the 6th or the 8th of October.
Okay, so it'll be after that meeting. Okay. At the last stormwater meeting, I did, make a plug that the plan was out there and where they could go to look at the plan. And based on some of the questions, I know clearly some of the people on that advisory group were looking at the plan. Yeah. So hopefully, they've seen the e-news that's out there. We send that e-news goes out to, anyone who has signed up for the Flood Action Alexandria, receives those announcements or had received this announcement.
Good. Thank you. Jim's got his hand up.
Yeah, Aaron, it just occurred to me that storm and sanitary are so closely interrelated, and if you get rid of a lot of the private I&I, if you disconnect roof drains, then they're going into storm sewers that may be undersized, and you've redirected the problem. It's a big challenge for the city.
It's a huge challenge. You're exactly right, and that's, and when we're looking at maybe implementing some of this, maybe we focus on the areas where, if we do private I&I disconnection, you're not going to do it everywhere at once, right? You may look at, we may have to prioritize, in areas where you have, let's say, overland relief, or there is a storm sewer system with capacity, because you're right, it will lead to more stormwater flow. But I think, but from our standpoint, that stormwater shouldn't be getting into the sanitary sewer system. Yes, there is a big stormwater problem to solve, but I think, there's so many issues. We have the sewage, granted, it is mostly stormwater when it does back up into a basement, but there is a sewage component with that. And there is, SSOs that can happen into the environment, whether it's out of our collection system or, out of the AlexRenew system, that can happen. So even though, yes, I agree that it does exacerbate maybe potentially with some of the stormwater issues, I mean, that flow isn't meant to be in a separate sanitary sewer system.
Good. Thank you, Aaron, and I'm sure we're going to ask you to come back, repeatedly to report on this. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Moving along on the agenda, it is now time for our outcome update from our CEO. Madam CEO, could you present the outcome reports?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in your package, you received the CEO's report. And in addition, you also had some attachments there, including the Rivernew dashboard. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have related to any of these documents. I don't have anything additional to add at this point, but I will follow up when we're done with the conversation with some reminders for dates that are coming up.
Karen, I was fascinated by the report on the wastewater surveillance program from Howard University. Give just a little background on that and what, how are you interpreting the results of that surveillance?
So the Howard University piece was more about testing the methodologies. That was a piece, I can't quite remember how we got engaged. We have a Howard University graduate working with us. And so we had some relationships there, heard about her research and volunteered to be part of that. And so that work then led its way into additional surveillance programs. We did this summer program with BioBot that was more of a CDC program, and now that funding was not re-upped. And so VDH has now tagged onto that and taken some of the state's ARP money and is doing continued surveillance. Right now, because of this Delta variant, it's hard to interpret the data. So we really don't have a lot to make a big determination. So what you see is what we have, hopefully within the VDH area, as they get it from all over the Commonwealth, we'll be able to make some sense. I think overall, we've come to a consensus that wastewater surveillance is a tool to help try to identify where you may have some outbreaks as things move on. But it's been very interesting. It goes back to the whole thing about our mission is public health. We tend to forget about that, and this is the reason why, right? So
I just want to thank you for a very forward-thinking partnership. That of course, it's hard work, it's research. It'll take a while to figure it out, but I think it's really positioning AlexRenew in a really smart way.
Yeah, we were pleased to be part of it, and we had a great team. Our lab did a lot of work, and as well as our operations staff pulling those samples and working with Howard on it. Mr. Dickinson?
Yes, I was whether or not there's been any interest shown by our own Department of Health in what you're seeing.
So, that's an interesting point. For a while, they were really busy trying to get a handle on COVID, and I think that was their focus. And then the next focus was vaccine rollout, and then they had some change in leadership. But to that end, very positive. They have reached out to us, and they are on the panel that overlooks some of this with VDH. So
Okay,
we're happy that they're engaged, and we've started to make those connections with the health department.
good.
Are there any other questions for the CEO from the outcome reports?
I would encourage you on RiverRenew, there's some links to the time-lapse camera. You can see one of the photos here. This is really behind already. The crews are really working hard to meet that deadline. So there's constant activity both here. I'm pointing out my window at the Holland Lane CSA construction staging area, as well as the teeny tiny spot that we've allocated for trailer to put those shafts in. So, keep up to date. I know you can't be here, but you can be here with us in spirit by checking those links. And as we start to deploy to each of the other construction staging areas at 001, 002, and 3 and 4, those time-lapse cameras will go in as well, so you can keep up. And if you have anybody who is as nerdy as we are and love this work, you can point them to those cameras and get them engaged as well.
And I would encourage the board members to make a visit to the plant or to Robinson Terminal North and some of the other sites. There's wonderful scrim up there. You really get the whole message about the RiverRenew project, and big cranes are starting to poke their height into the sky. It's really a lot to see. There's a lot. All of a sudden now, this project is becoming very, very visible.
Yeah, and if you know anybody who uses a soccer field, if you walk to the fence, both along the east side and then at the top of the dock, you can really get a good view now that the cranes are up. And it'll be really cool once they get those hydro mills up and they start digging and they put the big rebar screens in. Hopefully you all attended our community listening sessions and you know all about that, but yeah.
And I can answer any questions about the whole slurry process too. And also visit the RiverRenew site. There's some really good animation that's available on that site and very descriptive and curious to know how many people sort of download that and look at it, but time will tell. But just a really very impressive outreach effort.
Yeah, we felt it was really important. People don't understand infrastructure. They don't understand this construction, and it can be really intimidating and scary. So we thought the more that we could make it real for people in this way where they could see it and engage with it as it moved along, it would take some of that fear away, and they could help really visualize it. Most people are visual learners. So I'm hoping that we get some value out of it.
And Justin, our very own Justin, has become quite a good sort of play-by-play narrator to these videos. It's actually a very good combination of a voiceover and animation.
Yeah, maybe we should do that for the future, so we have him there. But yes, he's the best at that.
Yeah.
Karen, I see in your community outreach that you're releasing a storybook, Chloe, the PBM Builds a Tunnel. When is that coming?
Yes, I don't have my Chloe book. Oh no. Yes, we actually have a storybook. We did that. We have here at 3 and 4, we have all the daycares. We have like over 100 kids and a lot of parents. And then we also have St. Mary's. So it's a younger age storybook to try to get out to the kids and the parents before we start working in Jameson and working in that area where the kids are used to being able to have that space. So the parents know what's going on and they can talk to their kids about it as well and kind of engage around it. All right, my storybook is coming. One of the benefits of being able to be at your desk. So yeah, here, hopefully you can see that there's Chloe Builds a Tunnel.
Can I get a copy? I know a daycare in Old Town.
Yeah, we have copies for each of you.
Wonderful.
You would have had them at your desk, so we'll get them to your visual desks. We'll get them in the mail after the meeting.
Thank you.
Or we can pick, you may be able to, we may save them just, if you're all coming to the groundbreaking, we can bring them to you then. Mr. Dickinson. I can't
Bill-
hear you. Mr.
Bill, I
Dickinson.
think you're on mute.
Okay, here we go. I thought the SAG meeting was excellent as far as the presentations, but I was disappointed that we had, I think, 5 members who were missing. And that was, I don't know what we can do about that.
It was a timing
anyhow.
issue. Each of them had their own individual issues. You know, this was set well in advance. So we do the best we can. There's just
No.
going to be days when you don't have everyone there.
My question was whether or not some just are not interested anymore and we ought to look for a replacement, or has anyone indicated that to you?
No, I mean, we didn't think, it was on a Jewish holiday, so we had one member who is celebrating the
Mhm.
holidays. We were really only missing 4. A couple of members called in, they were ill and weren't able to
Okay,
attend.
okay,
So
okay.
you know, it's just a timing thing.
Okay, sure.
I didn't,
Uh,
so far, everyone is very engaged and I am
Good,
truly
good,
pleased
okay.
with the chair. I think he's doing a great job. And then, you know, I was actually really pleased by the SAG meeting. They gave us some really good
Oh,
feedback.
very good stuff, yeah.
Yeah, we were working so fast that sometimes we just miss those little details, and that's where you can get really hung up and make people mad. So all of them they do a really good job. They stay engaged even with the boring engineering stuff, and they give us thoughtful comments back. So I'm very pleased with the membership on the stakeholder advisory group. and
Okay.
Just their feedback.
Second question, you have a meeting with the mayor and council, I guess Councilwoman Jackson on the 23rd. Is that going to be a real meeting or a virtual meeting?
That is a virtual meeting. That's a council board work group meeting. We pivoted that as well to a virtual meeting. And so, yes,
Okay.
that's at 5:30 on Thursday. That's our normal quarterly council board work group
Okay.
meeting.
Okay, thank you.
And that meeting basically will be very similar to what you saw at the stakeholder advisory group meeting, getting them up to speed. Anything else?
Madam CEO, would you like to go over some upcoming dates that we need to make sure are on our calendars?
I did want to ask, I didn't want to skip over the financials. Were there any questions there? We did include a memo, as we always do each year. And we forewarn you each year when we do the budget, that this is a budget estimate that you're approving. This year, while we didn't go over the total bottom line budget number, we did have some CIP issues because RiverRenew spent faster than we had expected when we set the budget, you know, a year to 18 months ago. And so we went over that in that budget memo. We are in the middle of an audit. So far, we are doing a great job. I really want to commend Ms. McIntyre and her team. It is a lot of work because we are in single audit now because we are getting federal dollars. So there's a lot more, I guess, detail and different kinds of questions that the auditors ask to dig deep into different areas. And so far, we have really been able to answer their questions. We're maybe a few days behind just because of the virtual nature of getting this information and just because of the volume of the information that we have to get together for that, for this audit, but all is well. We've gotten some good feedback. I think they've spoken to Mr. Johnson already and addressed his issues. And we have a virtual finance and audit committee meeting. I'm trying to remember when we set the date. I will get that out to you. I believe it's in November 8th. So I'll make sure you.
Karen, yeah, November 8th is when you said it.
Thank you. Yeah, November 8th. And I believe the invite went out, but as time gets closer, I'll remind you in October as well.
Okay, good.
And then if there's no questions there, dates, don't forget, September 30th at 10:30. wearing your best looking AlexRenew colors and clothes is our groundbreaking at Outfall 001. We will get you some details on parking and masks if you need some. It is required that you wear a mask. We are limiting attendance. It's a small site, so having parking there and a stage and the crawler crane is challenging, but we want to make sure people do stay that 3 to 6 feet apart, and we're protective of everyone's health. We are going to have both our teams there, and so that's really my concern, is making sure nobody on the trailer team gets sick. So all those contractors are out there digging a tunnel the next day for us. So don't forget that. October 1st, we're having a blood drive. I'll ask Lorna to send you the link if you want to make an appointment. It's on a Friday. I think it runs from like 1 to 4 p.m. or something. It's again joint with our really good neighbor here, Lost Boy. Tristan is a really excellent neighbor for us. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it for us. Oh, Imagine a Day Without Water is on October 21st. And September 26th through October 2nd. That's our virtual water discovery days, which is put on by our One Water team, which is a partnership between AlexRenew, the City of Alexandria TNES, and Virginia American Water. So we will, after this meeting tomorrow, I'll send you some links to that as well.
Good. Okay. I would encourage all the board members who can attend the groundbreaking on the 30th to attend. I think it's important for us to be a unified front, both to the city leaders who are there and other leaders who are there, but also to the Trailer Shade team as well, because they don't get to see us too often because of COVID and everything else. So encourage everybody if you can. I know it's in the middle of the day, but if you could make it, that would be wonderful. So. And
if you're not able to make it in person, we are going to live stream this on riverrenew.com. So I know some of you may not be able to make it. We wanted to get as many participants as possible, so we'll get that information out. So you can send that to your friends and family if they're interested in watching a groundbreaking. The best part, though, is the March of the Crawler Crane, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so much to look forward to. Karen, if you had to guess, how many people will show up at the physical site?
So between us, Trailer Shay, in terms of volunteers and that kind of thing, and then people that have RSVP'd, a little over 100.
So a good number. Yeah, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Great. No,
it'll be amazing if you haven't been out there. When you stand on that site and you get to see the river, and you realize, just you take a look at our rendering when it's done, and you see how beautiful it's going to be, and how you can just go right out and just almost touch the Potomac River. It's so different from anything we have in the city. So it's really, it's just a good feeling to know that we'll be able to make that difference for the community.
Yeah, so big opportunity and a great learning opportunity as well. So good. Karen, is there anything else to go over?
Staff has nothing if you guys are good.
Members of the board, any other topics to cover? Survey the hands here. If there's no other business to go over,
Mr. Johnson, do you have a question, or did I miss that from before? I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
I see his hand now.
Yeah, but I don't hear him.
Oh, Bruce, can you see us?
Am I coming through now?
Oh,
Yeah.
We can hear you now. Yep.
Okay. In the financial section, we're real close to our cash reserve balance, a few $1,000s on the good side, but it hasn't been that close before. I assume that's due to the capital spending in fiscal year 21.
Yes, and it's just an anomaly of the timing of the requests in the cash flow. Ms. McIntyre isn't worried. It's just the way that the bills have come in and the way that we're getting the funding from some of our grants and loans. So nothing to worry about. It's just how the money ebbs and flows. And when we get the billing, we had a very large bill from Trailer Shay. You'll see that change over the course of the next month or two.
It's sort of esoteric question. We have the indenture requires a 60-day balance. And then our own financial policies double that.
Right.
So should we fall below 120 days, we'd only be violating our own policies, which isn't a great thing, but it's not the same severity as violating the indenture policy.
Yeah, and we
We
will,
wouldn't
we
have to
work
notify
hard
the
to,
bondholder or anything.
yeah, and we're not in danger of violating that policy, but you are correct. Yes, we're violating our own board set financial policies, which is not a good thing, but it's not violating the indenture requirements of 60 days.
The other question I had is about you've had several in August, a couple of days with the high rainfall and a couple sanitary sewer overflows, and we reported them to the, as a lot of people probably did, reported violations to DEQ. Any consequences, or are we just working through that reporting process back and forth?
As far as I know, no consequences. It will take them a while to process that. As you know, it was an unusual storm. A lot of people reported. So we'll wait and see what they do in assigning points and where we fall in that.
In the storm, just in the past week, did we have an overflow then too?
Not that I'm aware of, no. No.
Okay, all right.
It was a little different in the way that it ran. So, back to Aaron's point, these storms are really anomalous, and it's hard to pinpoint where and when things are going to overflow and how they get down to the plant.
Yeah, it's sort of, well, anyway, yeah, the 500-year storms are coming at us pretty fast.
Yeah, what was it? What was a 10-year, what was a 25-year storm is now a 5 or 10-year storm. So, and that's, part of our challenge is as designers, we've used history, and we don't have any really good history now to use to design for the future.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any further questions? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second,
All in favor?
aye.
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 Well, thank you, everyone, and stay safe. And I hope we can see you at the groundbreaking in a couple of days. So good night, everyone.
Aye.
Good night. Thank you all.
Right.
Thank you.